All right, we're going from tech to sports. We've got a big World Cup final this weekend in the Women's World Cup. England, where Laurie Laird is, they're taking on Spain in the final. But let's get to Gianfranco Infantino, the head of FIFA, stating that despite a tenfold increase in prize money from the 2015 edition, the Women's World Cup brought in more than $570 million in income and allowed soccer's international governing body to break even. In a speech that was characteristically aggressive for the Swiss, they claimed that the ninth staging of the FIFA Championship had been the, quote, best and greatest and biggest, and defended the choice to increase the prize money and increase the field from 24 to 32 teams. Take a look at this. So this is coming from Omdia Research, and they provided this data to Bloomberg. Look at that. World Cup sponsorship gender gap. The men's Qatar 2022 World Cup, in terms of sponsorship revenue, $1.7 billion. Now, the women, Australia and New Zealand 2023, of which England and New Zealand will be competing this weekend in the final, $300 million. So, of course, there is a large gap there that does need to be closed. And of course, all right, I think we got Laurie Laird back. Laurie, let's see if we can hear you. We got you. There we go. I can hear you clearly. Me now? Yes, good morning. So start over. You're rooting for England?
For England, otherwise my family's going to kill me. But I have a confession that I did vote for Nigeria in the knockout stage.
Hey!
It was such a heartbreaking. Wasn't that a heartbreaking loss?
It was really heartbreaking. Honestly, yeah, they got to do better on penalties.
That was. And that's where it let them down, because I thought Nigeria was definitely the dominant team in open play. Really disappointed, because the women, though your women, the Super Falcons, played so very well. What a disappointment. So tell me, before we get into this, who are you rooting for? Do you want England to lose because they knocked out the Super Falcons?
Obviously, yes. I'm going with Spain. I think, yeah, because I still got some bitter feelings. But the English team, they've played very well. May the best team win. But if Spain wins, I won't be disappointed.
Well, Spain looked really, really good. Although I'd say in England beating Australia, that was definitely their strongest performance so far. They looked very, very good. And this is, we're getting wall-to-wall coverage of the game here in the build-up to the game here in the UK. But I'm going to be honest here. Another confession. I'm not feeling as if everyone's talking about the Lionesses, but I don't get the sense that the interest in women's football is there yet. And I'm going to bring up just an anecdotal story. I watched the Euro finals in a football pub last summer, of course, when England won the Euros. And honestly, the pub was packed. Absolutely packed. But most of the men there were not focusing on the game. So I'm looking at these plays and I'm cheering. And honestly, the guys next to me were talking about, the waiting list for Tesla Model S's. The interest in play, seriously, just was not there. It really surprised me. So we're talking about it as a nation here, but I'm not entirely sure that the interest is there yet, despite some of the, watching the women's game. Technically, these women are so very talented. I find the play utterly compelling.
Indeed. There was I think when Colombia defeated Jamaica, there was one particular goal that Colombia scored. It's one of the most technically amazing goals I've seen a player, score. But Laurie, does that feed into the sponsorship gap of $1.7 billion for men, $300 million for women? Does this interest?
I mean, utter fraction. I think there are a couple of exceptions that we do have to consider here. And one was the way that the broadcast rights for this tournament were sold. Gianni Infantino, and we saw him a little bit earlier talking about how well this tournament has gone. But the broadcast rights weren't sewn up, at least in Europe, which is the biggest, the biggest viewing audience. They weren't sewn up until a month before the tournament started.
Wow.
And in fact, Infantino threatened to black out broadcast rights in the UK, in what's called the Big Five, the UK, Germany, France, Italy, I think, and Spain. The threatened with a blackout because he didn't believe the broadcast rights were high enough. The bidding was not to his liking. But this is a little bit hypocritical here. This is the first time that the women's broadcast rights have been unbundled from the men's broadcast rights. So Infantino is at one point saying these bids aren't high enough, yet in previous World Cups, these things were bundled together. Men and women were bundled together, essentially assigning negligible value to the women's tournament. So it's difficult to then turn around and say, we used to give you this for free, essentially. Now you're not bidding high enough. And I think that's one of the problems with sponsorship in this particular tournament, is that those broadcast rights were not sewn up until exactly a month before the tournament started. Add into that a unfriendly time zone. Viewership for women's football, the big viewers are here in Europe. With these games starting early in the morning, it was less enticing for sponsors. That said, that doesn't explain all of it. And the fact that the sponsorship is just such a small fraction in the women's game compared to the men's game does show you that there is some ground to make up.
Laurie, see, this is why we have you on the show. This is why you're so integral to the company, because of these insights that you bring. Thank you for the unbundling.
Very sweet of you.
We only got a minute to go. I really need you to just share your thoughts on Saudi Arabia. Are they taking over sports? Are they, washing their human rights records? Well, in a minute, if you can, your thoughts on Saudi Arabia.
Utterly crazy, isn't it? We saw Neymar go this week, and it's becoming such a well-trod path. Cristiano Ronaldo, the first to go over for money that is absolutely mind-blowing. How this plays out, I think, is interesting. One of the things I want to keep an eye on, and you and I will keep an eye on it together, is how long do these players stay in Saudi Arabia? Certainly, they're looking at a lifestyle change compared to what they are doing in Europe, and whether this is sustainable, whether we'll see these guys. Ronaldo's a little different because he's an older player, but Neymar is pretty young. Can he adjust to the lifestyle in Saudi Arabia? A big change than what you're used to in Europe, although reports that Neymar insisted on a 25-room house and 9 cars, that'll soften the blow a little bit.
Laurie Laird. Laurie, people need to know this, that you are a sports head. You follow sports religiously, and it's not just fanatic. It's the NFL, NBA, NHL. Yeah, so
don't forget baseball.
And baseball. MLB as well. Laurie, we'll see what happens between England and Spain. Laurie Laird, Rise Business Analyst. Thank you so much for taking us through these sports headlines. Appreciate your insights, as always.